In the early 30s, psychologists were just coming to grips with the idea of a hidden dark side of the human subconscious. Replacing the idea of devil possession, it was the subconscious where unknown factors dwelled. Deep, dark structures that could drive people to all manner of hideous acts, including murder. In this otherwise B horror movie, one scene stands out as a serious attempt to explain the phenomena of the serial killer.
Your heartbeats are being reflected before you.
Doctor, I protest.
As the heart beats faster and faster, so does that red liquid begin to pulse and rise until terror takes hold of the subject and the liquid rises to the very top of the tube. He whose tube does that is the guilty man. Here are a line of wax figures.
It is the idea that hidden deep in the subconscious are triggers. Triggers such as the presence of a prostitute.
First, a woman of the streets, killed in a tenement district. Her body found late at night in a gutter. The next victim, a middle-aged woman, killed just before dawn as she was on her way to market. A bleeding body found under a dock by the waterfront. Then a dope fiend, strangled and mutilated in the doorway of a dance hall. Next, a beautiful young girl, violently killed as she lay on a hospital bed recovering from an illness.
Or the folklore trigger of a full moon, overcoming a person and unleashing a murderous obsession that must be carried through to completion.
You're about to see reenacted.
If you look at how people's attitudes changed towards these kinds of criminal acts, I think there was probably a time when people really believed that humans weren't capable of doing things like this, and that very well may be behind the legends of vampires or werewolves, some desire to sort of make what these people did otherworldly, because that was a way they could explain away the actions, right? No real person would do that, but a person who was a werewolf would when the moon was full because to lose their humanity, right? Or a vampire who had this sort of mythological function that was gaining eternal life through the killing of humans. What it does is it takes that person and makes them less human. One of the scariest aspects of talking about serial killers is to think that their behavior is very human.
To me, suggesting that there's one simple explanation that the moon was in this position and some sort of werewolf-related explanation is just too simplistic and, frankly, naive.
By 1892, Holmes' murder castle was complete. America's greatest serial killing spree was about to commence. At first, he advertised lodging to attract victims. Next, he put ads in small-town newspapers promising employment, particularly for young women. When they arrived, he took their money and they disappeared. But this was simply a lead-up to the stream of visitors arriving for the Great Chicago World's Fair in 1893. The fair was a monument to architecture and the arts. But at the same time, it highlighted firsts that were to become the hallmark of the United States industry and production. Easily prepared breakfast foods, including Aunt Jemima pancake mix, Quaker oats, and cream of wheat, debuted at the World's Fair. But the highlight of the fair's firsts was the dazzling technological breakthrough by Nikola Tesla and George Westinghouse when they introduced the entire country to electrical power by lighting up the World's Fair. But with all the innovation, there also came a darker side to the fair's firsts. Murder. Murder most foul. Murder without remorse. Next to the fair stood H.H. Holmes' House of Horrors, the first building ever constructed for the sole purpose of serial killing. For 6 months, a reeling mass of humanity jammed the fairgrounds. Thousands of these carefree fairgoers would go missing. How many fell prey to Holmes' House of Horrors will never truly be known.
My understanding is that he had the ability within his hotel to put a number of individuals in the same room and then deprive them of oxygen, and he was able to listen to them as they died. Now that's a step away from, say, the enjoyment of killing someone face to face, right? In other words, he wasn't stabbing them, he wasn't doing any of that. He was listening to them experience death. That came later. You know, his initial forays into crime, money-making schemes, con schemes, obviously predated the murder, but once he'd killed a few times, he apparently developed a taste for it. That hotel, while it was to a certain degree a money-making thing, I mean, he ran it as a hotel, there were people that checked in, he obviously got money from them, but there was a lot of money spent on pursuing his fantasy or his murder life, if you will. It's pretty interesting that he would use another kind of criminal behavior to essentially fund a non-profit making aspect of his criminal behavior, which was killing people for fun.
Holmes might never have been caught, except for his own greed. When the Chicago Fair closed in October of 1893, Holmes decided to leave the Windy City. But before he left, he teamed up with 2 other con men, Benjamin Pitezel and Marion Hedgepeth, for one more scam, this time in Philadelphia. The 3 of them agreed to fake Pitezel's death in a laboratory explosion and substitute a cadaver. They would then split the $10,000 life insurance policy on Pitezel 3 ways. But Holmes' greed led him to kill Pitezel for real. Then Holmes reneged on Hedgepeth's share and ran off with the money and 3 of Pitezel's 5 children, Howard, Alice, and Nellie Pitezel. Incensed that he hadn't gotten his share, Marion Hedgepeth ratted him out. Holmes was eventually tracked down by Philadelphia detective Frank Geyer in 1894. Geyer was the first of the serial killer detectives. Detectives who, through sheer determination and dogged police work, would bring these hell fiends to justice. Sadly, Geyer was too late to save the children. Holmes had already murdered them. The Philadelphia prosecutors tried and convicted Holmes for Benjamin Pitezel's murder and the brutal killing of the 3 children. But the full depth of Holmes' depravity lay back in Chicago. There, police, alerted by the insurance underwriter for the Pitezel claim, raided Holmes' murder castle. What they